I thought I had it all figured out. The penthouse, the ring, the woman everyone said was out of my league. But the night I walked into that study and saw my fiancé kissing my best friend, everything I believed about love shattered in an instant. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just left the ring on the table and disappeared from her world completely. What she didn't expect was that my silence would become the one punishment she couldn't escape. They thought I'd come crawling back, but sometimes the quietest exit leaves the deepest scar. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story about betrayal, dignity, and walking away is just getting started. The apartment smelled like garlic and rosemary. I stood in Evelyn's kitchen, stirring pasta sauce while jazz played low from the speakers. The city lights stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a carpet of stars laid flat. 42 floors up, the world felt small and quiet. I checked the timer on my phone. 8 minutes until the chicken was done. Everything was ready. The table was set. Candles were lit. I'd even folded the napkins the way Evelyn's mother did at those fancy dinners. The ones where I always felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes. Tonight was supposed to be special. Just us. No work calls, no charity events, no friends stopping by unannounced. Just me and the woman I was going to marry. I pulled the ring box from my pocket and set it on the counter. The diamond caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the marble. 3 months' salary. My father had raised his eyebrows when I told him how much I'd spent. Son, he'd said, shaking his head slowly, that's a down payment on a house. I know, Dad. You sure about this girl? I'd nodded. I'd been sure. Evelyn Whitmore was everything I'd never imagined having. Beautiful, successful, confident in ways I was still learning to be. She ran a real estate empire her grandfather had started. She wore heels that cost more than my rent used to cost. She spoke 3 languages and knew which fork to use at restaurants with names I couldn't pronounce. And somehow, she'd chosen me. Marcus Hill, a mechanic from the South Side who still had grease under his fingernails half the time. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Still on for drinks tomorrow? I smiled. Daniel Price had been my best friend since college. We'd met in a freshman English class, both of us confused about comma splices and thesis statements. He'd helped me pass. I'd helped him fix his car. Somehow, we'd stayed close, even as our lives went different directions. Yeah, man. Looking forward to it. I pocketed the phone and turned back to the stove. The sauce was perfect, rich and thick, just the way Evelyn liked it. I'd learned to cook from my grandmother. Simple, honest food that filled you up and made you feel loved. Evelyn had eaten at restaurants with Michelin stars, but she always said my cooking reminded her what food was supposed to taste like. That was one of the things I loved about her. She never pretended to be less than she was, but she never made me feel less either. At least, not on purpose. The oven timer beeped. I pulled out the chicken, golden and crispy. My mouth watered. I plated everything carefully, the way I'd practiced. Presentation mattered to Evelyn. Details mattered. Everything was ready. I glanced at my watch. 7:30. She should have been home 20 minutes ago. I texted her. Dinner's ready. You close? No response. I sat down at the table and waited. The candles flickered. The jazz kept playing. Outside, the city hummed with 1,000 lives I'd never know. At 7:50, I heard voices in the hallway. Relief rushed through me. She was home. But then I heard laughter. A man's laugh. And another voice I recognized. Daniel. I stood up slowly. My chest tightened, but I didn't know why. Daniel visited sometimes. It wasn't strange. Maybe they'd run into each other downstairs. Maybe they'd ridden the elevator up together. The voices were coming from Evelyn's study. The door was closed, but I could hear them clearly now. Evelyn's laugh, bright and easy, the kind of laugh she gave when she was relaxed, when her guard was down. I walked toward the study, planning to knock, to say hello, to invite them both to eat before everything got cold. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the tone of their voices, too soft, too familiar. Maybe it was instinct. I stood outside the door and listened. "You're terrible," Evelyn said, giggling. "You love it," Daniel replied. Silence. Then a sound I couldn't quite place. A rustle. A sigh. My hand reached for the doorknob, but I stopped. The study had glass walls on one side, panels that looked out toward the living room. If I walked around, I could see inside without opening the door. My heart pounded. My hands felt cold. I moved quietly, my work boots silent on the thick carpet. I walked around the corner toward the glass, and then I saw them. Evelyn was leaning against her desk. Daniel stood in front of her, his hands on her waist. Their faces were close, too close, and then they kissed. Not a quick kiss, not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss, slow and deliberate, his mouth on hers, her hand on the back of his neck. I stood frozen. My brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing, tried to find another explanation. But there wasn't one. They pulled apart slowly. Daniel smiled. Evelyn touched her lips, looking up at him with an expression I knew too well. The same expression she'd given me 100 times. My chest felt like someone had reached in and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. They didn't see me. I was standing in the shadow of the hallway, far enough away that the glass didn't reflect my face. I could leave right now. Walk away. They'd never know I'd seen anything. I watched them for another moment. Daniel said something I couldn't hear. Evelyn laughed again, softer this time, and then I understood. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was comfortable, easy, like they'd done it before. I stepped back, moving carefully. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight, but I didn't make a sound. I walked back to the kitchen. The food was still warm on the plates. The candles were still burning. The ring box sat on the counter where I'd left it. I picked it up and stared at it. 3 months' salary, a promise I'd been ready to make. I set it down on the dining table, right in the center, where she'd see it the moment she walked in. Then I pulled out my phone and turned it off. Completely off. Not silent. Off. I didn't want to see her calls. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. Most of my clothes were here now. I'd been staying over more and more, slowly moving my life into hers, slowly becoming part of her world. I grabbed a duffel bag and started packing. I took the clothes I'd bought with my own money, the jeans I'd worn in high school, the jacket my father had given me, the shirts that still smelled like the garage. I left behind everything she'd bought me, the expensive button-downs, the cashmere sweater, the watch that cost more than my car. None of it was really mine anyway. I zipped the bag closed and took one last look around. The bed we'd slept in, the dresser where I'd kept my things, the bathroom where we'd brushed our teeth side by side every morning. It had felt like home, but it wasn't. It never had been. I walked to the front door, stopped, listened. I could still hear them talking in the study. Their voices were quieter now, more intimate. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, and just like that, I was gone. I drove to my father's house in silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of the engine and the tires on the road. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the dashboard or call Daniel or turn around and go back. I just drove. The city gave way to older neighborhoods, smaller houses, quieter streets, the kind of place where people knew each other's names and sat on their porches in the summer. My father's house was dark when I pulled up. It was almost 9. He'd be asleep soon, if he wasn't already. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the small brick house. I'd grown up here, learned to ride a bike in that driveway, fixed my first engine in that garage. This house had always been too small for my dreams, but tonight, it was the only place that felt real. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. My key still worked. I let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake him, but the living room light was on. My father sat in his chair, a book open on his lap. He looked up when I walked in. Frank Hill was 60 years old, with gray hair and hands that had worked for 40 years. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me, and I knew he understood. "Spare room's ready," he said quietly. I nodded. "Thanks, Dad." "You eaten?" "Not hungry." He closed his book. "You will be. I'll make breakfast in the morning." I walked down the hallway to the room that used to be mine. It was smaller than I remembered. The bed was made. The walls were bare. It smelled like laundry detergent and old wood. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the bed. The springs creaked under my weight. My phone was still off. I pulled it out and stared at it. Part of me wanted to turn it on, wanted to see if she'd noticed, if she'd tried to call, if she was worried. But I didn't. I set the phone on the nightstand and lay back on the bed. The ceiling had a crack in it I'd never noticed before, or maybe it had always been there and I'd just forgotten. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw them again. Daniel's hands on her waist, her fingers in his hair, the way they'd looked at each other, like I didn't exist, like I'd never mattered at all. My chest ached, my throat burned, but still, I didn't cry. I'd cried enough for Evelyn Whitmore. I'd given her enough. She wasn't getting my tears, too. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot what had happened. Then, it all came back. I sat up slowly. My body felt heavy, like I'd been carrying something too big for too long, and had finally set it down. My phone was still off. I walked to the kitchen. My father stood at the stove, flipping eggs in a cast iron skillet. He didn't turn around when I walked in. "Coffee's ready," he said. I poured myself a cup and sat at the small table. The chair wobbled. It had always wobbled. My father plated the food and set it in front of me. Eggs, bacon, toast, simple, honest. Just like him, he sat down across from me with his own plate. We ate in silence for a while. He didn't push, didn't pry. He'd taught me a long time ago that some things didn't need words. Finally, he spoke. "You going to work today?" I looked up. "Yeah, I need to." He nodded. "Good. Routine helps." "I know." He took a sip of coffee. "You don't have to tell me what happened, but if you want to, I'm here." I set down my fork. She cheated. He didn't react, didn't look surprised, just nodded slowly. "With Daniel." His jaw tightened, just slightly, but I saw it. "You sure?" he asked. "I saw them." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did you do?" I left. "That's it? That's it?" He studied me. "No fight? No yelling?" "No. Why not?" I thought about it. Because it wouldn't change anything. They did what they did. Me yelling about it won't undo it. My father leaned back in his chair. "You're stronger than I was at your age." "I don't feel strong." "You are. Walking away. When you want to burn it all down? That takes strength." I stared at my plate. The eggs were getting cold. "You think I'm a coward?" I asked quietly. "No, son. I think you're smart. Rage feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last, and it doesn't teach anyone anything." He paused. "Silence, though. Silence makes people think." I picked up my coffee. "I don't want her to think. I want her to forget I existed." "She won't," my father said. "Trust me, she won't." At 10 o'clock, I drove to Ray's auto shop. It was a small garage on the east side, tucked between a laundromat and a corner store. I'd worked there all through college, and Ray had kept my spot open even after I'd started spending more time with Evelyn. "Always got work for you, Marcus," he'd said. "You're the best damn mechanic I know." I pulled into the lot and parked. Ray was outside, wiping his hands on a rag. He was a big man, 50-something, with a gray beard and tattoos up both arms. He looked at me and frowned. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel like hell." "What happened?" "Long story." He studied me for a moment. Then he nodded. "You want to work?" "Yeah." "Good. I got 3 cars backed up. Let's get to it." I followed him into the garage. The smell of oil and metal wrapped around me like an old jacket. I grabbed my tools and got to work on a Chevy with a bad transmission. The work was hard, physical. It required focus. And for a few hours, I didn't think about Evelyn, didn't think about Daniel, didn't think about the kiss I'd seen or the ring I'd left behind. I just worked. Around noon, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd turned it back on during my break. Habit, I guess. 23 missed calls, 17 texts, all from Evelyn. I didn't read them. I just turned the phone back off. Ray walked over, holding a wrench. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." "You sure? You look like you're about to rip that engine apart with your bare hands." I set down my tools and took a breath. "I'm good." He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. "Take a break," he said. "Get some air." I walked outside and sat on the curb. The sun was bright. The air smelled like exhaust and fried chicken from the place next door. Across the street, a couple walked by. The woman was laughing at something the man said. He had his arm around her shoulders. They looked happy. I wondered if Evelyn and I had ever looked like that, if people had seen us and thought we were happy, or if they'd always known the truth, that we didn't fit, that I was trying too hard, that she was slumming. My chest tightened. I pushed the thoughts away. Ray's voice called from inside. "Marcus, got another one for you." I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and walked back inside. Work was all I had now. And for today, that was enough. Evelyn's texts started coming through the moment I turned my phone back on that evening. I was sitting in my father's backyard, watching the sun go down behind the neighbor's fence. The phone buzzed so many times it nearly vibrated off the patio table. I picked it up and scrolled through the messages without opening them, just reading the previews. "Marcus, where are you? Please call me back. I'm worried. This isn't funny. I need to know you're okay. We need to talk. Please." I found the ring. "What does this mean? Marcus, please." I set the phone down and stared at the sky. Orange and pink streaked across the clouds. My grandmother used to say that sunsets were God's way of reminding us that endings could be beautiful. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. The back door opened. My father stepped out with 2 beers. He handed me one and sat in the chair next to mine. "She calling?" he asked. "Texting? You gonna answer?" "No." He nodded and took a long drink. "Good." We sat in silence for a while. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A car drove by with music thumping from the speakers. "You know what I learned when your mother left?" my father said suddenly. I looked at him. He rarely talked about her. She'd walked out when I was 7, moved to Atlanta with a man she'd met at work, sent birthday cards for a few years, then stopped. "What did you learn?" I asked. "That some people don't know what they have until it's gone, and by then, it's too late." He turned the beer bottle in his hands. I spent a long time being angry. Wanted her to hurt the way I hurt. Wanted her to regret it. Did she? Don't know. Never asked. He looked at me. But I learned something else too. The anger only hurt me. She was off living her life, and I was stuck, holding on to something that was already dead. "So, you just let it go?" "Eventually. Took longer than it should have." He paused. "But you're smarter than I was. You let it go right away. That's the difference." I took a drink. The beer was cold and bitter. "I don't feel smart. I feel stupid. For trusting them. For not seeing it. You're not stupid for trusting. People you loved, they're stupid for not deserving it." My phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. A call this time. Evelyn's name lit up the display. I watched it ring, watched it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. My father raised an eyebrow. She's persistent. She's panicking. Why? I thought about it. Because I didn't yell, didn't fight, I just left. She doesn't know what to do with that. Good, my father said. Keep her guessing. The phone rang a third time. This time I turned it off completely. You hungry? My father asked. Not really. Too bad, I'm making chili, you're eating. The next morning, I went back to the garage. Ray had a Honda with electrical problems and a Ford that needed new brakes. I worked straight through lunch, my hands moving on autopilot. Around 2 in the afternoon, a car pulled into the lot, a silver BMW. I knew that car. I didn't look up, just kept working on the Ford, my head under the hood. Footsteps approached. Expensive shoes on concrete. Then Daniel's voice. Marcus. I didn't respond, just reached for a wrench. Come on, man, don't do this. I tightened a bolt. My hands were steady, my jaw was clenched. We need to talk, Daniel said. I straightened up slowly and looked at him. He was wearing a suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored. His hair was styled. His watch probably cost more than everything I owned. He looked nervous. Good. Nothing to talk about, I said calmly. Marcus, listen. I saw you. My voice was quiet, even. I saw you kiss her. His face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. He ran a hand through his hair. It's not what you think, he said finally. I almost laughed. It's exactly what I think. It was a mistake. We were drinking and... Don't. I held up a hand. Don't insult me by lying. I saw the way you looked at her. That wasn't a mistake. That was something you've wanted to do. He didn't deny it, just stood there, looking at the ground. How long? I asked. What? How long have you wanted her? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Does it matter? Yeah, it does. He sighed. Since the beginning. Since you first introduced us. The words hit me harder than I expected. 3 years. We'd been friends for almost 10 years, and for 3 of them, he'd wanted the woman I loved. And you never said anything, I said. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Marcus, I know you're in love with her, but I want her too. He shook his head. You had her, I didn't. That was the reality. So you waited until you saw an opportunity. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He didn't answer. I turned back to the car. Get out of here, Daniel. Marcus, I said get out. I didn't raise my voice, didn't yell, just spoke clearly. And don't come back. We're done. You can't just throw away 10 years of friendship over this. I looked at him again. You threw it away, not me. You did that. The moment you put your hands on her. His jaw tightened. I could see him struggling, trying to find the right words. But there weren't any. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car. The BMW pulled out of the lot, leaving tire marks on the concrete. Ray walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. That your friend? Used to be, he nodded. Looked like he needed a punch in the face. He's not worth it. Ray studied me for a moment. You're handling this better than most people would. Am I? Yeah. Most guys would have torn this place apart by now. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in grease and oil. Maybe I'm just too tired to fight. Nah, Ray said. You're just smart enough to know that fighting doesn't fix anything. That evening, I met Lena Brooks at a coffee shop downtown. She'd been texting me all day, worried because I hadn't been responding to anyone. Finally, I'd agreed to meet her. Lena and I had known each other since high school. She was a nurse at County General, worked night shifts, and had a laugh that could fill a room. She'd never liked Evelyn much, said she was too polished and smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. I thought Lena was just being protective. Now, I wondered if she'd seen something I'd missed. She was already sitting at a corner table when I walked in. She stood up and hugged me tight. She smelled like vanilla and hospital soap. "You look terrible," she said, pulling back to look at me. "Thanks. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" "Last night." "How much?" "Maybe 3 hours." She shook her head and sat down. "Sit. I already ordered you coffee. Black, no sugar, just like you hate it." Despite everything, I smiled. "Why do you always do that?" "Because you need to suffer a little." She pushed the cup toward me. "Now tell me what happened." I told her, not everything, not the details, but enough. By the time I finished, her jaw was tight and her eyes were hard. "That bastard," she said quietly. "Which one?" "Both of them, but especially Daniel. You've been friends with him for years. He stayed at your apartment when his lease ended. You helped him move. You—" She stopped and took a breath. "I'm sorry. I'm making this about me. This is about you. It's okay." "No, it's not." She leaned forward. "Marcus, I need you to hear me. What they did, that's not on you. That's not because you weren't good enough or didn't do enough or any of that garbage you're probably telling yourself. I'm not—" "Yes, you are. I know you. You're sitting here wondering what you did wrong. Wondering if you'd been different, if she'd have stayed loyal." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "But you didn't do anything wrong. They did. Both of them." I stared at my coffee. "I should have seen it." "How?" "You trusted them. Trust doesn't come with X-ray vision." "Maybe it should." She squeezed my hand. "You're allowed to be angry, you know. You're allowed to be hurt." "I am hurt." "Then show it. Yell. Cry. Break something." "What's the point?" "The point is that you're human. You're not a robot. You're allowed to feel things." I pulled my hand back gently. "I am feeling things. I'm just not showing them. There's a difference." She studied me. "You're scaring me a little. This calm, quiet thing you're doing, it's not healthy. It's all I've got right now." "Marcus." "Lena." I met her eyes. "I'm not going to fall apart. I'm not going to yell or throw things or show up at her apartment and make a scene. That's not who I am." "Then who are you?" "I'm the guy who walks away. The guy who doesn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break." I paused. She kissed him in her study, in the place we were supposed to build a life together. And you know what she did after? She laughed. Like it was easy. Like I didn't matter. Lena's expression softened. "Oh, Marcus. So no, I'm not going to give her my anger or my tears or anything else. She doesn't get that. She's taken enough." We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop hummed with quiet conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Lena said, "You're right. She doesn't deserve your anger. But don't let that mean you're not processing this. Don't let it eat you up inside." "I won't." "Promise me." "I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Okay. So what now?" "Now I keep working, keep living, keep moving forward." "And Evelyn? What about her? Is she still trying to contact you?" "Yeah." "You gonna talk to her eventually?" I thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe. If she deserves it. And if she doesn't, then I don't." Lena smiled. A small, sad smile. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think she's realizing right now what she lost. And I think that's going to hurt her more than anything you could say." I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and terrible, just like she'd promised. "Good," I said. 2 days later, Evelyn showed up at the garage. I was working on a transmission, my hands deep in grease when I heard Ray call my name. I looked up, and there she was. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. She wore jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before. She looked like a normal person, but I knew better. Marcus, she said softly. I looked at Ray. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I wanted him to kick her out. I shook my head. Give me a minute. Ray nodded and walked away, but I could tell he was staying close, just in case. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped outside. Evelyn followed me. What do you want? I asked. My voice was flat, no emotion, just a question. I want to talk. About what? About us. About what happened. There is no us, and what happened is pretty clear. Her eyes filled with tears. Please, just listen. I'm working. Marcus, please. I said I'm working. I turned to walk back inside. She grabbed my arm. Wait. I stopped, looked down at her hand on my sleeve. She let go immediately. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. For what? For kissing him? Or for getting caught? She flinched. For hurting you. You didn't just hurt me, Evelyn. You destroyed 3 years. 3 years of trust, of building something, of me believing we were on the same team. We are. No, I cut her off. We're not. We never were. I was just too stupid to see it. That's not true, isn't it? I stepped closer. She stepped back. Tell me something. Did you ever actually love me, or did you just love the idea of me? The mechanic boyfriend, the guy who made you feel like you were different from your friends, like you weren't just another rich girl. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it doesn't mean I didn't love you. Love doesn't do what you did. People make mistakes, Marcus. We're human. Mistakes are forgetting to pay a bill. Mistakes are burning dinner. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. I need to get back to work, I said. Can we talk later, please? I don't know. When will you know? When I'm ready. I turned and walked back into the garage, leaving her standing in the parking lot. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I didn't look back. Ray was waiting inside. You okay? Yeah. You sure? Because you look like you want to punch something. I'm fine. He didn't believe me, but he handed me a wrench anyway. Get back to work, he said. Best medicine there is. I nodded and got back under the car. But my mind wasn't on the transmission anymore. It was on Evelyn's face. The tears, the desperation, and the small, quiet part of me that still wanted to forgive her. I hated that part of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the narrow bed in my father's spare room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with Evelyn over and over. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. It doesn't mean I didn't love you. Words. Just words. Easy to say, harder to believe. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep. I pulled on jeans and a hoodie and walked out to the backyard. The air was cold. The sky was clear. Stars scattered across the darkness like broken glass. I sat on the concrete steps and pulled out my phone. I'd been avoiding it, avoiding the messages, the voicemails, the evidence of how much she was trying. But tonight, I was tired. Tired of being strong. Tired of holding everything in. I opened my messages. 53 unread, most from Evelyn, a few from Daniel. One from Evelyn's assistant asking if I was okay. I scrolled through them, didn't read them, just looked at how many there were. Then I opened the voicemails. The first one was from 2 days ago. Evelyn's voice, shaky and uncertain. Marcus, please call me back. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're okay. Please, I need to know you're safe. The second one, from later that night. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But please, just talk to me. We can fix this. I know we can. The third one, from yesterday morning. I went by the garage. You wouldn't talk to me, and I get it. I do. But Marcus, I'm begging you. Give me a chance to explain. I deleted them without listening to the rest. Then I opened the text messages. Most of them were similar. Apologies, please, promises that it didn't mean anything, that she loved me, that Daniel meant nothing. But one message caught my eye. It was from yesterday afternoon, sent after she'd left the garage. I talked to my mother today. She said I should just move on, that you're being dramatic, that you'll come back once you realize what you're giving up. But she's wrong. Isn't she? You're not coming back. I stared at that message for a long time. You're not coming back. She was right. I wasn't. But what struck me was the rest of it. Her mother, Margaret Whitmore, the woman who smiled at me during dinners but never quite met my eyes, who asked about my work with a tone that made it sound like she was asking about a hobby, not a career. The woman who'd never once called me by my name, always Evelyn's friend or the young man. I'd tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that Evelyn loved me and that was enough. But now I wondered, had Margaret been in Evelyn's ear this whole time, telling her I wasn't good enough, that she could do better? Had Evelyn believed her? I put the phone away and looked up at the stars. My grandmother used to say that when you didn't know what to do, you should ask the sky. Let the universe tell you which way to go. But the sky wasn't talking tonight. The next morning, I went to work early. Ray wasn't there yet, but he'd given me a key, years ago. I let myself in and started working on a Jeep that needed an oil change and new filters. The work was mindless, easy. It gave my hands something to do while my brain spun in circles. Around 9, Ray showed up with coffee and donuts. "You're here early," he said, handing me a cup. "Couldn't sleep. Woman still bothering you?" "She's trying." He nodded and bit into a donut. "You ever think about talking to her? Just to get it over with?" "I talked to her yesterday." "And?" "And nothing. She apologized. I didn't accept." "You gonna accept eventually?" I looked at him. "Why would I?" "Because maybe you need closure. Maybe you need to hear her out so you can move on." "I don't need her for that." Ray studied me. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're scared." "Of what?" "That if you let her talk, you might forgive her. And you don't want to forgive her." I set down my wrench. She kissed my best friend in her apartment while I was in the next room making her dinner. Why would I forgive that? "I didn't say you should. I said you're scared you might." I turned back to the Jeep. "I'm not scared. I'm done." "If you say so." We worked in silence for a while, but his words stuck with me. Was I scared? Was that why I kept avoiding her? Because part of me still wanted to believe her excuses? No, I wasn't scared. I was just tired. At lunch, I drove to a diner on the south side. It was a small place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played country music. I'd eaten here 100 times growing up. The waitress, Betty, had known me since I was a kid. "Marcus Hill," she said when I walked in. "Haven't seen you in months. Where you been hiding?" "Around," I said, sliding into a booth. "The usual?" "Yeah, thanks." She brought me a burger and fries a few minutes later. I ate slowly, watching people come and go. Families, couples, people who looked like they had their lives figured out. I wondered if any of them were pretending, if any of them were holding on to something that was already broken. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Margaret Whitmore. We need to talk." I stared at the message. Evelyn's mother, the woman who'd never liked me, the woman who probably celebrated when I left. I started to delete it, but something stopped me. "About what?" The reply came quickly. "About my daughter. And your future. Meet me at Rosewood Cafe at 3 p.m. Don't keep me waiting." I almost laughed. Even in a text, she sounded like she was giving orders. I thought about ignoring it, about blocking the number and moving on, but curiosity got the better of me. Fine, I'll be there. Rosewood Cafe was in the heart of downtown, tucked between art galleries and boutique shops. It was the kind of place where coffee cost $8 and the chairs were uncomfortable but looked expensive. I walked in at 3 o'clock exactly. Margaret Whitmore was already there, sitting at a table, by the window. She wore a cream-colored suit and pearls. Her hair was perfect. Her posture was perfect. Everything about her screamed control. She looked up when I approached. Her expression didn't change. "Marcus," she said. Not a greeting, just an acknowledgement. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sit." I sat across from her. A waitress came over, and Margaret ordered a tea. I asked for water. "You're probably wondering why I wanted to see you," Margaret said once the waitress left. "I assumed you wanted to yell at me for breaking your daughter's heart." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "On the contrary, I wanted to thank you." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You did what I couldn't. You ended this ridiculous relationship before it went any further." My jaw tightened. "Ridiculous?" "Yes. Surely you must have known it would never work. You and Evelyn come from different worlds, different values, different expectations." "I loved her." "I'm sure you did. In your own way." She folded her hands on the table. "But love isn't enough. Not in the real world. Evelyn needs someone who can match her, someone who understands her responsibilities, her position." "Someone rich," I said flatly. "Someone appropriate." The waitress brought our drinks. I took a sip of water, buying time, trying to keep my voice steady. "So you're here to tell me I wasn't good enough," I said. "I'm here to tell you that you deserve better. Both of you do." "Better than what?" "Better than forcing something that was never going to last." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, Marcus. Did you ever feel comfortable in our world? At the dinners? The galas? The fundraisers?" I didn't answer. "That's what I thought," she said. "And Evelyn? Did she ever truly fit into yours? Did she ever seem at ease in your neighborhood? With your friends? Your family?" "She never complained. She's polite. She was raised to be gracious. But that doesn't mean she belonged." I set down my glass. "With all due respect, Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't come here to be insulted." "I'm not insulting you. I'm being honest. Something I suspect very few people in your life have been." "And what's the honest truth?" "That this was always going to end. The only question was when, and how much damage it would cause." She paused. "You saved both of you from a very messy, very public divorce. You should be proud of that." I stood up. "I'm not interested in this conversation." "Sit down, Marcus." "No." Her expression hardened. "I could make your life very difficult. One phone call and you'd lose your job, your reputation, everything." I leaned down, my hands on the table. "Go ahead. Make your calls. Ruin my life. But you know what? I'll still sleep better than your daughter, because I know who I am, and I know I didn't cheat." Her eyes narrowed. "Evelyn made a mistake. She made a choice. She's human. She's flawed. Just like you. Maybe. But I didn't betray the person I claim to love." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Margaret called out, "She'll move on, you know. She'll find someone else, someone better suited to her life. And you'll still be working in that garage, wondering what could have been." I stopped, turned back, looked her in the eye. "Good," I said. "I hope she does find someone, someone who fits, someone you approve of, someone who makes her happy. And you, I'll be fine, because I don't need her money, or her world, or her mother's approval. I just needed her loyalty, and she couldn't even give me that." I walked out before she could respond. That evening, I sat with my father on the back porch again. He didn't ask about the meeting, didn't push, just handed me a beer and sat down. You know what I realized today? I said. What's that? I was never going to be enough for her. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because her world wouldn't let me be. My father nodded slowly. That's a hard truth to swallow. Yeah, but it's better to know it now than 10 years from now, when there's kids involved, a mortgage, a whole life you've built on a lie. I took a drink. Her mom said I should be proud, that I saved us from a messy divorce. She might be right, even if she's a cold-hearted witch for saying it. I almost smiled. Almost. You think I did the right thing? I asked. Walking away without a fight? I think you did the only thing you could do and still keep your dignity. He paused. Rage is easy, son. It's satisfying. But it burns hot and fast and then it's gone. What you're doing, that takes real strength. It doesn't feel strong. It never does. Not in the moment, but give it time. One day, you'll look back and realize you handled this the way a man should. With grace, with integrity. And that's something no one can take from you. We sat in silence, watching the sunset. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. And for the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. I felt peace, small, fragile, but real. 2 weeks passed. I worked, I slept, I ate, I existed. Evelyn stopped texting, stopped calling. I didn't know if that meant she'd given up or if she was just regrouping. Either way, I was grateful for the silence. Daniel sent one last message. I'm sorry, man, for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Lena checked in every few days, making sure I was eating, sleeping, not falling apart. I appreciated it, even when I didn't say so. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of myself that had been with Evelyn, not the man who wore expensive watches and ate at fancy restaurants. The real me, the one who worked with his hands, who drank cheap beer and listened to old jazz records, who was comfortable in his own skin even when that skin didn't fit into high society. I didn't know what came next. Didn't know if I'd ever trust someone again, if I'd ever want to. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not to Evelyn, not to that world, not to pretending I was someone I wasn't. I was moving forward, and that was enough. 3 months later, spring arrived. The city thawed, trees budded, people shed their heavy coats and walked slower like they had time again. I'd settled into a rhythm. Work at the garage, 6 days a week, dinner with my father on Sundays, coffee with Lena when our schedules matched. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd saved enough to move into my own place. Nothing fancy, a one-bedroom apartment above a barbershop on the east side. The walls were thin and the plumbing was old, but it had good light and the rent was fair. I'd furnished it with things from thrift stores and garage sales, a couch that sagged in the middle, a table my father had built years ago, dishes that didn't match. It felt more like home than Evelyn's penthouse ever had. I was changing the oil in my truck one Saturday morning when Ray called me into the office. Got something for you, he said, holding out an envelope. I wiped my hands and took it. Inside was a check. A big one. What's this? Bonus, you've been busting your ass the last few months. Figured you earned it. I looked at the amount again. Ray, this is too much. It's not. You're the best mechanic I've got. Hell, you're the best mechanic in the city. I can't pay you what you're worth, but I can do this. He paused. Besides, I heard you got your own place. Thought you could use it. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. Thank you, I managed. Ray nodded. Don't thank me. Just keep showing up. That afternoon, I drove across town to pick up some parts. The route took me past the Rosewood district, past the restaurants and galleries, past the building where Evelyn lived. I hadn't been back since I'd left, hadn't even driven down this street. But today, I didn't. Turn away. I kept driving, and as I passed her building, I glanced up at the windows. 42 floors. I couldn't see which one was hers from down here, couldn't tell if she was home, and I realized I didn't care. Not in a bitter way, not in an angry way. I just didn't care. She was part of my past now, a chapter that had closed, and I was okay with that. I kept driving. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I saw her. Evelyn stood in the produce section, holding a bag of apples. She wore jeans and a white t-shirt. Her hair was down, unstyled. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered. For a moment, I considered turning around, leaving before she saw me. But then, our eyes met. She froze. The apples slipped from her hand and tumbled to the floor. I walked over and picked them up, handed them to her without a word. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded. We stood there, the space between us filled with everything we weren't saying. "How have you been?" she asked finally. "Good. You?" "I'm managing." She looked down at the apples in her hands. "I've been wanting to talk to you, to apologize properly, but I didn't know how. You just did. That's not—" She stopped, took a breath. "Can we talk, just for a few minutes?" I glanced around. The store was busy. People pushed carts past us, oblivious to the weight of this moment. "There's a cafe around the corner," I said. "I can give you 20 minutes." We sat outside at a small table. Evelyn ordered tea. I ordered nothing. "I know you don't owe me anything," she started. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, and I know sorry doesn't fix that." "You're right, it doesn't." She nodded. "I've been trying to understand why I did it. Why I risked everything for something that meant nothing. And, and I think it's because I was scared." I almost laughed. "Of what?" "Of you, of how much I loved you, of how different you were from everyone else in my life." She looked at me. "You were real, Marcus. You didn't care about my money or my name or any of it. You just cared about me. And that terrified me. So you sabotaged it." "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I was still in control, that I could still do whatever I wanted without consequences." "And Daniel?" She flinched. "Daniel was convenient. He was there. He said the right things. Made me feel like I wasn't losing myself in you." She paused. "But it was a lie. All of it. And the moment you left, I realized what I'd done. What I'd lost." I sat back. "You want me to tell you it's okay? That I understand? That we can fix this?" "No. I know we can't." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know you're not coming back. I've known that for months. But I needed you to hear this. To know that it wasn't about you not being enough. You were always enough. More than enough. It was me. My insecurity. My stupidity." A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away, quickly. "I also need you to know something else," she said. "What?" "I ended things with Daniel. That same night, after I found the ring, I told him to leave and never come back." "Good for you." "And I talked to my mother. Told her she was wrong about you. That you were the best thing that ever happened to me. And that I was an idiot for not seeing it." I didn't respond. She didn't agree, of course. She said I'd find someone better, someone more appropriate. Evelyn's voice shook, but I told her she was wrong, that there is no one better, and that I'd spend the rest of my life regretting what I did to you. The silence stretched between us. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked finally. "Anything at all to make this right?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Yeah," I said. "There is." Her face brightened slightly. "What?" "Move on. Find someone who makes you happy. Someone you don't feel scared of. Someone you won't betray." I paused. "And learn from this. So you don't hurt the next person the way you hurt me." The hope drained from her face. "That's it?" That's it. You really won't give me another chance? No? Even if I promised things would be different? Promises don't mean much anymore. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected this but hoped for something different. I understand. I stood up. I need to go. Marcus, wait. She stood too. Can I ask you one more thing? What? Did you ever love me? Really love me? I looked at her, at the woman I'd planned to marry, the woman I'd cooked for and laughed with and held at night, the woman who'd made me believe I could belong in a world that was never meant for me. Yes, I said, I loved you, more than I've ever loved anyone. Then why? Because love isn't enough, not when there's no trust, not when there's no respect, and not when someone shows you exactly who they are. I walked away before she could respond, before she could see that my hands were shaking, before she could hear the crack in my voice. I got in my truck and drove, not home, not to the garage, just drove. I drove until the city gave way to open road, until the buildings disappeared and the sky stretched wide and endless above me, and then I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat there in the silence. I'd done it. I'd faced her. I'd heard her apology, and I'd walked away anyway. It should have felt like victory, like closure, but mostly it just felt sad. Sad for what we'd been, sad for what we'd never be, sad for the man I'd been when I met her, young and hopeful and naive enough to believe that love could bridge any gap. I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't know if that was good or bad. I just knew it was true. I sat there until the sun started to set, until the sky turned that particular shade of orange that my grandmother had loved, until I felt steady enough to drive home. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Evelyn, to myself. I wrote about the man I'd been, the man I was becoming, the lessons I'd learned the hard way. I wrote about trust and betrayal, about dignity and rage, about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the words ran out, until I'd said everything I needed to say. Then I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and locked it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'd read it again. Maybe one day I'd need the reminder. But for now, it was enough to know I'd survived, that I'd walked through the fire and come out on the other side, not unchanged, not unscathed, but standing. 6 months after I'd left Evelyn's penthouse, I was at a red light when I saw a familiar silver BMW. Daniel was in the driver's seat. He didn't see me. He was talking on his phone, laughing at something. He looked the same expensive suit, same styled hair, same oblivious confidence. The light turned green. He drove one way. I drove another. And I felt nothing. No anger. No bitterness. No urge to follow him or confront him or make him pay for what he'd done. He was just another car on the road now. Another stranger whose life didn't intersect with mine. Lena said that was growth, that forgiveness didn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it just looked like indifference. I thought she might be right. One Sunday, I was having dinner at my father's house when he asked me a question he'd never asked before. You think you'll try again? He said. With someone else? I looked up from my plate. Try what? Love, relationship, all of it. I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. Someday. You scared? A little. He nodded. That's normal. After what you went through, anyone would be. He paused. But don't let what she did make you hard. Don't let it close you off. I'm not trying to be closed off. I know. But it's easy to build walls without realizing it. To protect yourself so much that you forget how to let people in. He looked at me. Your mother hurt me bad, Marcus. And for a long time, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. Never love anyone again. Did you? No, but that's my regret. I let fear win. I let one bad experience define the rest of my life. He leaned forward. Don't do what I did. Don't let her take that from you. I won't, I said, but I'm not in a hurry either. Good. Take your time. Heal. Figure out who you are without her. He smiled. And when you're ready, when the right person comes along, don't be afraid to try again. A year after I'd walked away, I bought a car. Not a new car, a used one, a 1970 Mustang in rough shape. The engine was shot, the body was rusted, the interior was torn, but it had good bones. I towed it to my father's garage and spent my evenings working on it, rebuilding the engine, fixing the body, replacing the seats. It was slow work, patient work, the kind of work that required attention and care and time. But piece by piece, it came together. My father helped sometimes. Lena stopped by with food and encouragement. Ray gave me parts at a discount. And one Saturday morning, I turned the key and the engine roared to life. It was loud and rough and far from perfect, but it ran. I took it for a drive, rolled down the windows, let the wind blow through, felt the power of the engine beneath me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to joy. Some mornings I still thought about Evelyn, not often, not painfully, just occasionally. I wondered if she'd moved on, if she'd found someone new, if she'd learned her lesson or repeated her mistakes. I wondered if she ever drove past the garage, if she ever saw my truck and remembered the man I'd been. I wondered if she regretted it, if the silence I'd left behind still haunted her, if she understood, finally, what she'd lost. But mostly, I didn't wonder at all, because I'd built a life without her. A simple life, an honest life, a life where I didn't have to pretend to be anyone but myself. I worked hard, saved money, helped my father with repairs around his house, had coffee with Lena, fixed cars, lived quietly, and somehow that was enough. One afternoon, I was at a stoplight downtown when I saw her car. The same Mercedes she'd always driven. It was parked outside a cafe. I didn't stop, didn't turn around, didn't try to see if she was inside. I just kept driving. Because that chapter was over. The book was closed. And I was writing a new story now. One where I was the main character. Where I made the choices. Where I didn't need anyone's approval or validation or love to know I was enough. The light turned green, and I drove forward, into whatever came next, into the life I was building, the life I'd earned, the life that was mine. Some people might call it lonely. Some might say I should have fought harder, should have forgiven, should have given her another chance. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt. They didn't stand outside that study and watch the woman they loved kiss someone else. I'd made my choice, and I'd live with it, not with regret, not with bitterness, but with dignity, with peace, with the quiet knowledge that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes the loudest statement you can make is silence. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if I'd love again, didn't know if I'd ever fully trust someone the way I'd trusted Evelyn, but I knew I'd be okay, because I'd survived the worst. I'd walked through the fire. I'd faced the pain and come out on the other side. Not perfect, not healed completely, but standing, moving forward, living. And some mornings, when the light hit just right, when the city was quiet and still, I'd catch myself smiling. Not because I'd won, not because she'd lost, but because I'd found something more valuable than revenge. I'd found myself again, and that was worth more than any apology, any explanation, any second chance. It was worth everything. The last time I saw Evelyn was by accident, a random Saturday months later. I was leaving a hardware store, carrying paint cans for my apartment, when I spotted her across the parking lot. She was getting into her car. She looked different again. Her hair was shorter. She wore sunglasses. She moved slowly like she was carrying something heavy no one else could see. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. She raised her hand slightly, not a wave, just an acknowledgement. I nodded once, and then she got in her car and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear into traffic, and I felt nothing but a quiet, peaceful closure. She was a memory now, a lesson learned, a scar that had healed over. But she wasn't my present, and she definitely wasn't my future. I loaded the paint cans into my truck, climbed in, and headed home. To my small apartment with the good light, to my simple life with its honest work, to the man I'd become, stronger, wiser, more careful with his heart, the man who knew that sometimes love isn't enough, that trust, once broken, can't always be rebuilt, and that walking away with your dignity intact is its own kind of victory. Some stories don't end with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Some stories end quietly, with a nod across a parking lot, with silence that speaks louder than words ever could, with the simple understanding that some people come into your life to teach you what you deserve and what you'll never accept again. Evelyn taught me that, and for that lesson, painful as it was, I was grateful because now I knew my worth, and I'd never settle for less again.